He's not been transparent. I mean,
They
are
making routine announcements about the things they are finding, and they are inviting questions about the things they are finding every single day.
But by definition, he's not being transparent. They're not providing data for the things that they say they have found evidence of. They just aren't.
The White House has provided.
You can make announcements, and you also did admit that he actually.
So you just don't believe it. I mean, they are providing information. You just choose not to believe it.
Yeah. So this is another great case of a liberal arm, right, of the Democratic Party, just neutrality, right, of these journalists, right, arguing, right, but nonetheless. The work is still getting done. We are still finding more things. We're still bringing more stuff to the light and creating the most transparent presidency ever. We're only about 3 weeks in, and the amount of stuff that we've already found is quite shocking, in my opinion. And one thing that we have seen is we have a government that has the retirement plans of each person stored in a cave. Like, what are we doing, right? Why? It's 2025. Why do we not have digital computerized systems that deal with this? What are we still doing with paperwork? This is another great example of how inefficient the government actually is with their jobs. And I'm so happy that Doge and Trump are exposing all of this. And, at the end of the day, you can say what you want about either party, either person, but one thing you can't say is that they haven't been transparent. So I think it's hilarious that that journalist or news commentator says they're not being transparent. But let's get into Jesse Waters' talk with Levitt about the inefficiency and the deep state's cave. It's hilarious. So let's get to it.
So Obama knew about the retirement cave, spent millions to try to computerize America's workforce retirement paperwork, failed. Does President Trump promise we're going to shut this cave down?
Yes, he does. And that's why Elon Musk and President Trump brought it to the American people's attention in the Oval Office yesterday. And as they did that, Jesse, I was watching the faces of the mainstream media reporters who were in the Oval Office. And there was sheer silence because it appeared that many of them who are supposed to be writing the truth about our federal bureaucracy had no idea that the federal retirement system is being processed deep into the ground and is not computerized. And the president and Elon are shining a light on the truth about our federal government. But the mainstream media simultaneously is saying there's an alleged lack of transparency and access. It's preposterous. Together, President Trump and Elon, the entire Doge team, and this entire administration are shining a light on the corruption, the waste, the fraud, and abuse. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and they are revealing the rot of this city every single day. And it's music to the ears of the American people who voted for this, as you rightly pointed out. 77 million of them liked what President Trump promised on the campaign trail, and he's delivering. And it's fascinating to watch.
Everyone's coming up to me talking about these ridiculous items, the Guatemalan sex change surgeries, terrorists' tuition. It's unbelievable. The president the other day, Caroline, said some of this has to be kickbacks. Is he going to direct Pam Bondi to look into some of these spending items to see if people were skimming?
Well, he's already directed Elon Musk and Doge to do just that. And of course, the secretaries at all of his departments as well, who have signed secretarial orders to direct their staff at their respective agencies to cancel these contracts if they do not align with the president's America First agenda. And so all of these secretaries have been directed to go line by line and determine whether or not this funding advances America's interests. And as you heard heard President Trump say in the Oval Office today, the vast majority of these contracts that America has been dishing out do not align with the American people's interests. They are the antithesis of putting America first, and it's been a complete waste and abuse of the American taxpayers' hard-earned dollars. And so the entire administration is on board with this effort, and it's about time that people in this city treat the federal government as a business. Small business owners across the country have to look at their money in and their money out every single day. Bureaucrats have never done that, and that's the other irony in the mainstream media saying that there's no transparency. I mean, before it was Elon Musk and President Trump doing this and being highly scrutinized for it, it was just unnamed bureaucrats in the city that nobody knew just writing checks. And finally, we're actually looking at the books, and what they are revealing is truly appalling, but I guess not surprising when you look at the way that Washington has been run for decades. Again, the American people voted for this monumental change, and that's exactly what they're getting.
You know, you showed some receipts today, like they didn't believe these things existed. If you show these people in the press room, this is $2.5 million for cow flatulence reduction. Do any of these reporters make a case for $2.5 million for cow flatulence reduction in Brazil?
Well, they tried to make the case yesterday for $50 million in condoms to Gaza, saying that they actually went to another country, as if that's any better. The point is we are discovering this egregious misuse of American taxpayer funds. And yes, Jesse, we have the receipts, and I will continue to pull them at every briefing if they continue to ask, and we will provide that information. We have nothing to hide. Again, President Trump is exposing what the American people want him to do.
Yeah, so these guys are absolutely on it, and the spending has been so egregious. I can't even believe how
reckless and wasteful
ineffective
spending
this administration that came in and the past administrations really have done. And it's only going to get more transparent and more eye-opening as time goes on. The unthinkable of a president is being transparent the entire time. And dude, the guy is live streaming or a press conference almost every single day, right? Biden was at the beach 40% of his presidency. He was on vacation for 40% of his presidency. So I don't want to hear absolutely anything about transparency with this presidency at all. And the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse that we have really seen is so bad, and it's only going to get worse if we don't do anything about it. And we have people like the Doge team, right, like Rand Paul that we're about to get into, that are trying their best to bring everything to light, and it's only going to get more transparent as time goes on. So let's get into it. Rand Paul absolutely destroys the bureaucratic system that we have at this time. And, you know, I'm happy that the work that he's been doing is actually getting shown. And he's been doing this every year, but this is one of the only years that it's actually been brought to the table and really shined a light on. So with that being said, let's get into it.
of our federal government, particularly when it comes to foreign aid. The United States should not be the sugar daddy for the entire world, especially not for countries and organizations who act contrary to our nation's beliefs. Our country is $36 trillion in debt, yet we continue to send billions of dollars overseas, often funding projects that are not just useless, but in many cases actively harmful. Taking the path to fiscal responsibility is often a lonely journey, but thanks to Elon Musk and Doge, they've brought to light the waste that I've been highlighting for over the last decade. Every year I release my Festivus report to expose the ridiculous spending of the federal government, and this past year was no exception. I uncovered over $1 trillion in government waste, with the State Department and USAID being some of the worst offenders. Let me give you just a few examples of what these unelected bureaucrats are spending your hard-earned money on. $4.8 million went to Ukraine's public affairs office in Kiev to fund social media influencers. Instead of protecting our own border, $2.1 million was sent to Paraguay to enhance their border security. USAID also funded a group of Ukrainian women-led designers to travel to the Paris Fashion Show. I don't know about you, but I'd imagine Ukrainian women have more important things to worry about than appearing in the Paris Fashion Show. USAID spent $2 million on transgender surgeries, hormone therapy, and gender-affirming care in Guatemala. $3 million was spent to promote girl-centric climate action in Brazil. And I'd love to picture what a conversation about girl-centered climate action looks like. It's like, hey, Barbie, do you know what girl-centered climate change is? Since when do we believe arguments need to be tailored for girls to understand? How insulting to women at large that they think there are special arguments for girls to understand that are different than boys. $25,000 to fund a transgender opera in Colombia. Was nobody in Colombia willing to buy a ticket? USAID spent $32,000 in Peru to create a comic featuring a trans hero to address social and mental health issues. What does that have to do with diplomacy? $20,000 to fund a DEI program for a drag theater in Ecuador. $20 million was spent to produce a new Sesame Street show in Iraq. USAID spent $6 million to promote a project boosting sustainable tourism in Egypt. I guess the U.S. is now the travel agent for the entire world since they spent $50 million on Tunisia's tourism, even though it's already one of the most visited countries in Africa. USAID gave $87.9 million to help Afghans farm, and incidentally, farm poppy, the plant from which opium is extracted. As of 2021, Afghanistan supplied 90% of the world's heroin. I thought the saying in the U.S. was just say no to drugs. How about we just say no to wasteful foreign aid?
Can you believe that? First of all, I love how Rand Paul describes what is going on, what the money's being spent on, and then does a little joke at the end, kind of like a backhanded joke. It's just hilarious to me. But think, we're spending $80 million, right, to send to these heroin farmers, basically. Make it make sense. I cannot believe we actually do stuff like this. But everybody knew it, but now we got the receipts. So let's keep getting into it.
$70,000 for a live musical event to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in Ireland. State Department paid $330,000 to compile a disinformation index to blacklist conservative media outlets. USAID funneled over $54 million to EcoHealth Alliance, funding the very organization linked to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the likely origin of the COVID-19 pandemic. Disgraceful. $15 million was awarded to Taliban-controlled Afghanistan to distribute oral contraceptives and condoms. There's still a $3 billion fund for Afghan reconstruction that have tried to take that money to pay for other things that the government is spending money on, and yet there's been resistance by the other side to deplete that fund and say, we're done funding things in Afghanistan. This is just the tip of the iceberg. These are taxpayer dollars being used to fund ideologically misguided, ineffective, and unnecessary projects, thanks to the blundering bureaucracy, while our own citizens struggle to put food on the table. This is not what our government was designed to do. The U.S. government is not a charity, and it should not be doling out cash to foreign organizations, some of which actively oppose the United States with no oversight. And we don't have the money to give. We're borrowing the money we send. We need to ask a simple question. Why are we borrowing money to send money overseas? Even if USAID eliminated the crazy left-wing grants for trans operas, it still makes no sense to borrow money to then turn around and send it overseas. Borrowing money to send as charity is like the worker who has no money left after paying for their food, rent, and gas, saying, oh, well, I see this homeless person, I have such great sympathy. I'll go to the bank and I'll borrow $1,000 to give to this person. That's what we are doing. We can't pay for our own, and we are borrowing the money we send overseas. That money could be used to pay down our $36 trillion debt and take care of the American people, the very people who actually pay these taxes in the first place. It's time for a real change. America should not continue to be the world's piggy bank. It's time to end the waste of foreign aid and end the bureaucracy and for once do what's right by the American taxpayer. With that, I recognize the ranking member.
Yeah. So these guys are on it. Rand Paul is on it. A lot of people are looking into this, and I'm really excited that people are waking up. And the waste, fraud, and abuse has to stop. And it's with conversations like this. It's with bringing it to light. It's shocker giving the American people full transparency and all of the information to make up their own mind, right? Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, has absolutely made a vacuum of information, and stuff gets discussed and debated instantly. We do not have to wait for legacy media to talk about things anymore. We discuss it. We are the media, and overall, this waste has got to stop. And one thing he said is we're taking loans in debt to send foreign aid. How idiotic can people be in the government? They are terrible at their job, but they're getting their buddies rich. So what can we do? That's exactly what they got in that position for. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share Smooth Unfiltered.